I think it's safe to say that this is the most anticipated Backyard Brawl in a long time. Certainly in this installment. And the rebirth in 2022 was rocking. It was much anticipated. But this one, with the return of Rich Rodriguez as head coach of the Mountaineers, his first game against Pitt of any kind since the infamous one in 2007, brings this one to another level. The 1-1 Mountaineers against the 2-0 Pitt Panthers. It's an evening affair, 3:30 on Saturday in Morgantown. I'm Mike Asti. This is another episode of Mountaineer Report, and this is a Backyard Brawl preview edition, a live preview edition of the show. You can find Mountaineer Report everywhere you get your podcasts and also here on YouTube, and of course, made possible by West Virginia Sports Now. I will now bring on my co-host Luke Blain with me on WVSN, and then also joining us here to talk the other side from our partner site, Pittsburgh Sports Now, Nathan Breisinger. So, guys, I feel like we've been previewing this and people have been talking about this matchup, the last one of this current series installment since Rich Rod got hired. It kind of made it more interesting for both fan bases. That would have been in December. We are now finally here. It's September 11th as we're speaking. It's going to be, ironically enough, you couldn't write this any better, on September 13th. It's finally freaking here. I'm almost tired of talking about this and previewing it, but we're going to do it for this show. But then we're going to put it to bed and actually get the game to be played.
Yeah, I think that this game is going to be fantastic. And as you said, Mike, a lot of hype around this one, maybe more so than that 2022 one. Obviously, a lot of juice in Pittsburgh that year, you know, having that return there, biggest sports crowd in Pittsburgh history, 70,000. But this game with Rich Rod back, going back down to Morgantown, where WVU won in 2023, but now you get a chance, and you're coming off this Ohio loss. I mean,
and won a decent amount of the recent home games for West Virginia. They've been winning the home games if you go back prior to the rebirth of the series as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. And Pitt has to go down there and win. And this is a team on paper that is better than West Virginia. Yeah. West Virginia is coming off that Ohio loss, and there's still a lot of mystique around this Mountaineer team.
There's mystique for sure. There's mystique around the program, even though maybe some could argue the luster has been lost the last 6 or 7 years. And maybe Rich Rod is trying to get that mystique back. And of course, Nathan, a victory over Pitt would help get that mystique back despite the Ohio loss. We've seen programs recuperate and even make the playoff when they have a bad out-of-conference loss. It can be done in this era. You lose the brawl in your Rich Rod on September 13th. In addition to the Ohio loss, the fan base may dip out here before conference play even gets started. The pressure is really all on Rich Rod in West Virginia, and as you mentioned, they are undermanned, to say the very, very least. Luke, I want to get you to jump in here, and then we're certainly going to go around the docket here and maybe for some West Virginia fans learn about this Pitt team that I don't think there's an argument on paper. They should win this game. The line has really moved in their favor, and with Jaheim White and Jaden Bray both out, this would definitely be an upset despite West Virginia being at home. And normally when you're talking the brawl, you kind of throw that out the window. Anybody can beat anybody, but this would be a tall task here for this Mountaineer team. But maybe it could happen. Stranger things have happened. We certainly have seen an upset or two in this series. Luke, what did you make of Rich Rod's comments in particular this week, downplaying the significance of the past, trying to make it just about this year's team, trying to win it for this year's team, kind of trying to stay away from those questions, and didn't get any really in any other pregame interview that I've heard him do. So he's managed to get kind of unscathed when you think about it, guys. Like, to go into this, you think he would get more heat. Not having game day may be a good thing in a way. He doesn't get the 3-hour funeral that would have been on that 2007 season. They now just are going to be able to play the game, and he wants to make it about this year, not the past.
Yeah, I think it's a good move for him to say that. I think that, as the coach, you'd never want to make it about you. I never, in my personal opinion, I don't think that's a good look. But I think that a lot of the more mature coaches in the nation will focus it more on the team. Now, in his mind, I don't buy it. I don't buy it that internally, I think you have to, there's no way. Like, internally, you have to be thinking he is probably replaying things he missed in that '07 game, just mistakes that were made, things that he wishes he could change. I mean, you saw it whenever he came back for his inaugural press conference he was emotional. This means a lot to him. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I think just, realistically, you can't look at this game and the significance. I mean, he has played in this game. He has coached in this game. He knows how much this game means to the state of West Virginia. And I think the word for this week is redemption. You get that chance at redemption for Rich Rod on 9/13, which everybody has hammered that nail on the head enough that I think we can, that dead horse is beyond dead right now. So I think when you add that in, and also you have this team needs to redeem itself from the absolutely poor showing that it put up last week. It was a poor playing performance. It was a poor coaching performance. So there's a lot of pressure. There's even more pressure on this game now after you go out and crap the bed against Ohio. It's just, I think that, but maybe that's where that energy is coming from, where it's, maybe he is thinking redemption, but maybe more so for this year's team because of just the absolutely poor showing that they put out on the field last week in Athens.
Yeah, it does add desperation to this year's team because you go 1-2 and out of conference play. The likelihood of running the table in the Big 12 and winning a conference title doesn't seem that high with Jaheim White out. So to make this a respectable year in year one, even though it's year one, this fan base is hungry off of the last 6 years. They're not just going to take a 3-8 year that occurred in 2001. And he told me outside of a bar in Pittsburgh during the West Virginia Caravan that he can't have a 3-8 year. He pretty much has been told that's not going to work this time for his tenure. Yeah. So if that's the case, he's going to start needing to get some wins here pretty soon and to help those vibes improve. And what's also kind of, I don't know, apropos about his return this year, not only is this game on 9/13, but unlike Neil Brown when he lost in 22 in kind of heartbreaking fashion, Nate, he was able to get a receipt the next year. He didn't win the series. He lost 2 and only won 1, but he does have the 1 win. If Rod loses this game, yes, the rivalry comes back in 2029. He's 62 years old. He's already admitted he's not going to coach beyond this contract. Whatever happens in this contract is it. If he continuously loses, even if there are injuries, he could get fired. I don't think Ren Baker is just tied to him for 5 years, even if they're not winning. Separate from that, Narduzzi's been at Pitt forever. There's no guarantee Narduzzi's going to be around in 2029. Pitt has a new athletic director. If they would lose this game and their year goes off the rails, maybe they make a change. And if they don't this year, it's hard to believe 4 more years he's still going to be there. Ren Baker, Green, ADs don't usually stay at a school for a decade, no matter how good or bad it is. So it's hard to believe that that's going to be a revenge. It might be a whole different cast of characters when this series gets rebooted. So this is really it. If he would have came back last year and they would have fired Brown last year and hired Rich Rod last year and you lose because of injuries, you can at least redeem yourself the next year. There's none of that for Rich Rod. What I do want to ask you, Nate, I don't know if you found this interesting, kind of on the same vein here as we're initially talking about the past, but we're going to get into this year's team and this year's game for sure here. Mountaineer Report, Nathan Breisinger of Pittsburgh Sports Now, joining Luke Blain and I here on Mountaineer Report here via West Virginia Sports Now, is that it also appeared Narduzzi kind of tried to downplay the past a little bit. He didn't throw a jab of 13-9. The social media account, I'm sure, is going to, but in past years, he would throw a little jab even at Neil Brown. Didn't see that. I know him and Rich Rod are friends personally. I don't know if that's part of this at all, that maybe he likes him, but didn't really get a jab. I saw even one comment of a transcript I saw that he even said, something about, back when that game was played, I don't want to talk about the past. I think it was 2007. I'm sure he knows the year, but he kind of tried to play coy there. He didn't throw any type of, we're going to try to win this game, maybe 13-9 or some type of random comment like that maybe people were expecting out of him. Were you surprised at all by that tactic from him, or is this typical Narduzzi for you?
No, I'm not surprised. I think at this point in this series, this current 4-game installment, because you had that in 2022 because it was so fresh, and that was the last big memory for Pitt, the program, the fans of that 2007 game. But now you have 2 wins in this most recent installment, a really good game last year that they won in the final 5 minutes of the game. And even in 2022, same thing, last 6 minutes that they came back in that game. But he did say early on at Monday in his press conference about West Virginia still having old scars.
I
But
did
then
see
he
that.
sort of said a time frame of 35 to 40 years, but I think he's really pointing at
You would
that
think.
2007 season. But no, I think he's more focused on this most recent installment, these last 4 games. And I think Pitt center Lyndon Cooper put it in a good way. They're trying to leave their legacy on this current part of the rivalry with this game. So I don't think they're looking back. I don't think they're looking a little bit forward that they're not going to play them for the next couple of years. But this one is a big deal, as you said, Mike, to start things off. That there's a lot more importance, I think, around this game maybe than any of the other 3 they've played the last 3 years.
Yeah, and I think there might be something from Narduzzi. Tell me if you think this maybe is accurate, trying to read the man's mind, which is a risky tactic here, trying to read into Narduzzi's mind. It's a scary place, I'm sure. But he can't go back and get credit on himself for 2007, even though the program's going to bring it up forever, no matter what happens. If he's the head coach that Rich Rod kind of gets his receipt against, or gets the win and then they don't play and then they're not back again, I mean, I don't think Narduzzi wants to go out with having the last brawl be a loss for him in Rich Rod's return, and then he doesn't get another chance for 4 years. It's not like he's a young man either to imagine that he'll still be there at that point. This maybe is something that he kind of just wants to play it close to the vest, because there's more pressure on Rich Rod for sure, but there's a lot of pressure also on Narduzzi. You can't get to the level of Rich Rod pressure, but there is still pressure on Narduzzi. His fan base, if they lose this and then have a bad year, could turn on him. And then I don't think he wants to be the coach that, because you just expressed it. Pitt has been, well, they had the 3-9 year, but the last 5 years, Pitt has certainly had more success than the Mountaineers. The Mountaineers, from Neil Brown's hiring to now, and I don't mean this to be throwing shots at Brown, it's just the facts, has been the darkest period for West Virginia football history since the 70s. It's just a fact. And if you go back further than that, you're talking about the 30s. Like, it's been a while since the Mountaineers had this long of a stretch, not getting ranked, not really being relevant. But in the brawl, even with West Virginia having down years, the brawls have always been close. Pitt, as you mentioned, had to come back in several of those games. They did win 2 of the 3, and the year they lost, they can blame on Jerkovic, and they had a really, really bad year that's kind of uncharacteristic. But if they lose this, then it's 2-2. And I think it's going to get to a point where you can talk about 2007, but Narduzzi's going to probably sit there and say, I didn't win that game. We're 2-2. And, I don't have anything up on Rich Rod and the Mountaineers. So, like, there's kind of pressure on him. Do you think that's at all accurate that he's feeling now, and maybe why he's choosing not to throw the jabs that he did throw before 22? Because 22, he was throwing haymakers before that rivalry got started again, but he knew he had 3-4 games in front of him. It's different now.
And Narduzzi's such a player's coach that I think in 2022, he needed to do that a little bit to get the guys, into that rivalry. Whereas Rich Rod, 70, 80 guys new to this program that you have to teach them about the rivalry. Now, Pitt's roster, about half of them, if not 75% of them, know this game. No, some of them were there in 2023 when they lost. A lot of them were there in 2024.
Right.
But I think, there is a lot more weight on his shoulders with this game, just because there is a 4-year period where you don't play, and you want to come out ahead in this rivalry, and you want to have the last laugh for a couple years, because, the one thing that, as you're talking there, that makes me think about is Pitt does not get a chance to play Penn State. Obviously, whatever goes on there, but in that recent 4-game stretch, Pitt was 1-3. I don't think they want that to happen again. I think they want to be on the other side where they're 3-1 and they can say, okay, yes, we were 1-3 against the in-state rival and one of the top powers recently in college football in the Big Ten, but at least we went 3-1 against this really regional rival that's just right down the road. And there's a lot of hatred, a lot of fun hatred in this rivalry, where maybe the Penn State Pitt rivalry is more arrogance from the Penn State side, where this one's like, both sides, you get a chance to, both teams win. West Virginia, obviously, in 2023, but I think this game, you get to go out on top for at least this part. And if Narduzzi's done within the next 2, 3, 4 years before the rivalry comes back, he can say that he went 3-1 against a rival, because in some programs, it means a whole big deal to go and beat your rivals, Ohio State, Michigan. They want to beat their rivals. They don't want to lose to Michigan.
Yeah.
West Virginia, of course. They don't want to lose to Pitt.
Ohio State wins the national title, and Michigan fans are talking smack all year because they won the rivalry game. So I think that's the same thing.
Exactly.
He's probably thinking to himself, yeah, okay, Jaheim White and Jaden Bray are out. Maybe we're going to have a better year overall. But if we go win the ACC and lose to West Virginia, Mountaineer fans are going to bring it up all day, every day. It matters what happens on the field. And if you go historically, Pitt has about a 20-game edge in the rivalry, but they also have 20 more home games in the rivalry if you go way, way back. And for the last 50, 60 years, it's been really, really close regardless of what's going on with these programs. And it's kind of also odd, Nate, if you look back at history, it's very rare that these two programs are good around the same time, but the games are always close. But to be 3-1 in a 4-game stretch, there are not many Pitt coaches that can kind of say they owned the Mountaineers in a series, even though the games were close. A 3-1 edge is a 3-1 edge. A lot different than a 2-2 edge. And I think especially because as you're talking, Nate, I also was thinking, I'm sure Luke can attest to this, you do know what's going to be the comeback if Narduzzi and Pitt win this in a blowout, which I think is on the board because of the Mountaineer injuries. West Virginia fans are going to say it's year one, it's 8 new players, Jaheim White's out, Jaden Bray's out. What can you do? Pitt's more ready for this with more of a veteran team. But as much as that is the case, he still wants to win. And if you lose to West Virginia in that scenario, and then you're 2-2, that really turns up the noise, and the vibes around Pitt might be exactly what the vibes are currently around West Virginia. This all might flip around. I mean, it really, that's kind of the situation these days. Luke, the interesting thing about this game to me is there are a lot of Mountaineer fans that seemingly believe West Virginia has a shot in this when, despite the injuries and the way the season has unfolded so far, conventional wisdom doesn't really say that. The odds makers don't say that. Why do you think there's, I don't know, is this just like cockeyed optimism here, or are West Virginia fans kind of hoping with their heart? Why do you think they think this can be a victory for the Mountaineers and then Rich Rod can kind of muster this up somehow?
Yeah, there are certain games where I feel like no matter what the two teams look like, no matter what their records are, you come in there and it's a rock fight. And the Brawl is absolutely one of those games. I think that's been the tale as long as the game's been played. Now, I think that's why WVU fans get that optimism. I think WVU fans really like being the underdog. I think WVU as a program kind of thrives whenever they're the underdog. But in this case, man, it's hard. I think the fans actually do make up part of the advantage for this game. Pitt hasn't played a road game yet. I think that is a potential
this
advantage.
Being in Morgantown is a big deal. Yeah, if this was in Pitt after having 13-9, this is a little easier to deal with, I think, for Rich Rod too.
And then you have like the fan atmosphere. I think will be more like crazier than anything else we see the rest of the year. Just because of this game. And, no matter, even if WVU goes undefeated in Big 12 play and it comes down to the last game to get into the Big 12 tournament, like, I think like this game is so vastly important to Mountaineer fans. Now, I think I've said this before, but if you put this game in one of those bubble practice facilities that they use whenever it rains, I'm taking Pitt just about every time. But the atmosphere, I'm not sure this Pitt team's ready for it. I mean, like Nate pointed out, that you have some players who were there 2 years ago, but now Eli Holstein wasn't there 2 years ago. I don't know if he's played an environment like he's going to see on Saturday. There's a lot of factors from that standpoint that make me think that WVU could really pull off the upset here if things fall their right way. Of course, they can't give up 40 minutes of time of possession like they did against Ohio. They can't do that at all. And there are things that just have to go right. They can't be shooting themselves in the foot in this game because Pitt will take advantage of that. They did 2 years ago, last year, whenever WV fans know what happened last year. And it's just like, there are a lot of things that need to go right. This team has to drastically improve from last week. And they just have to go out there and play better than they did at Ohio. And, I don't think the fan perspective has been knocked at all. I think that this will be a classic Backyard Brawl fan show out from WVU in Morgantown. And I know because, well, if you drive around Frat Row or anywhere in Morgantown, you can see some painted bed sheets that have some messages that should
Yeah.
not be repeated on a live stream. So I'll just leave it at that. I think the hatred is very much still there for WVU fans,
Yeah.
and I think that it will make a difference. And I've said that from the beginning.
Yeah, and there's also a difference right now of the states of the program. Obviously, West Virginia
Yeah.
does have a history of winning and wanting to win, but this is year one for a new coach. Most reasonable Mountaineer fans, if they get a win over Pitt and maybe make a bowl, it's going to be okay, and then they'll be hyped for year two, and maybe that's where you try to worry about contending in the Big 12. Whereas conversely, Narduzzi, again, he's been there forever. You do have the ACC crown, but now getting in this new format, you have a 3-9 year that wasn't supposed to be that. Last year, you get ranked, you're 7-0, and then you lose all those games in a row, even with some injuries. You don't even win the bowl game. I mean, it despite the conference title, it's been a long time since Pitt even won a major bowl game, whereas West Virginia's won a lot this century and even prior in these last 40, 50 years. So there's reason for Mountaineer fans to just invest it all into this game. They win this game, maybe they'll forgive Ohio, and then it's almost like the rest is gravy. Whereas maybe this goes to some hidden, underrated pressure on Narduzzi that, he needs to win this game. I think Pitt fans will take just any kind of win because it's the Brawl, but they need to win this game. And then if you lose it, that's really where I guarantee you Pitt loses this game with West Virginia so undermanned. Someone out there is writing some article that Narduzzi needs to go. That's probably going to be the response in some column somewhere. Luke, do you have anything for Nate?
Yeah, I really am curious. Looking at this team, looking at Pitt from last year, I know Desmond Reed made some big plays in that game last year. Eli Holstein, obviously, I think is a name that's going to be etched into WVU fans' brains for a long, long time, unless they can figure it out on Saturday and manage to get this win. I guess, in what ways is this Pitt team the same, and what ways are they different from last year?
I think a lot of the playmakers are back, as you said. Holstein, Desmond Reed, Kenny Johnson in the receiving game, Poppy Williams receiving wise, Jake Overman tight end wise, and half of the offensive line. So a lot of the playmakers that West Virginia, or some of the guys who are still there that they may have faced last year, are still there. And the play style of Holstein is pretty much the same. He dealt with an offseason injury where it required surgery from an ankle injury he had late last season, but he's the same Holstein. He's going to climb the pocket, make throws, on the run. He did so against Central Michigan. He did so last year against West Virginia. You recall the long 2nd and 30 touchdown to Dejon Reynolds climbing the pocket, and then also, fighting through a potential face mask to get off a big run before that final touchdown. That's what West Virginia should expect. And I think the thing for Holstein in this game is he's probably going to use his legs a little bit more. He has a lot of options to throw the ball around, and Pitt, they're going to be looking to pass probably more than they want to run, but I think he's going to need to get out and scramble more. But what's different about this team is there's, I think, more options in the receiver room. With what they brought in, this Kateris Hicks from Louisville. He's been really good through the first 2 games. Has a lot of speed. So if Holstein can give him the ball, he's a type of guy that can make a difference. And take off and pick up big gains. And that's what Pitt wants to do. They want to be explosive. They want to be yards after the catch, and that's just the type of spread offense they run. Now, the thing that concerns me a little bit about Pitt offensively is the run game really hasn't been established too much besides maybe 1, 2, 3 big runs from Desmond Reed. They really have not been able to pound the rock like they have in the past under Frank Signetti or teams of the past. Like when Pitt was down there 2 years ago, that first drive, every single play was a run with Rodney Hammond and Sebo Flemister, and then they couldn't score at the end. But this team hasn't done that yet under Cade Bell. And I think they're going to have to rely on that a little bit in this game, because obviously that crowd's going to play a huge factor. And if that offense gets a little out of sync, I think there could be some troubles. And as you said, I don't know, Mike or Luke, whoever said it there about Holstein playing in an environment like this. I think it was you, Luke. Me and Mike were texting about, the only game really that Narduzzi compared it to is Cincinnati. And even that's not even that.
Yeah, I kind of laughed, and it's 20,000 less people. It's not the same atmosphere at all. It's not a college town. I'm not trying to throw shade at Cincinnati, but that's not the same. If that's the closest he has, it's going to be different then.
It was a good crowd, but no, it's going to be a whole lot different. And the ACC teams they played on the road last year did not have any sort of real atmosphere. I mean, they played SMU, they played Louisville, and those were okay environments. But yeah, this is going to be a really tough test, I think, offensively. They're going to be using silent counts, of course, with the type of noise they're going to face. And the offensive line brought in 2 transfers on the left side. Can they stay together? Now, I didn't look in specifically, but last time they down in Morgantown, they took 9 penalties. I don't know where that fell, how many offensively, how many defensively. Didn't look too specifically into that, but that's going to be key for Pitt. And there's still some chemistry to be built on the offensive line. It hasn't been great. It's been maybe above average at best through the first 2 games against inferior opponents. So the offense, they can be good. They can be explosive, but I think just being consistent will be huge. And I don't know if they're really ready for that just yet.
Yeah, and as Luke knows, especially with Jaheim White out, especially with Rich Rod returning, especially with this being a little different vibe now on this year's game in comparison to the last 3 years, this Mountaineer crowd is going to try to win this game on themselves if they can. They're going to try to help out. This might be the most, this is hard to say, but this might be the most energy that you're going to get from a West Virginia crowd that you've had in a while. Even the game a couple years ago, that was a crowd that brought a lot of energy into that game. But going into the game, as you guys know, a lot of fans were still kind of unhappy with the direction of the program. They wanted Brown fired. They weren't really thrilled. They weren't going to all the games. They brought it for that game. This crowd is maybe going to bring the energy they could bring all season here. I think most Mountaineer fans feel like this is probably not a Big 12 title year with all the injuries, but if they can win this game, they'll take it. Like this kind of would be their championship game. And that might be the energy that is there. And it's also a double-edged sword, Nate. And I'm sure Narduzzi kind of thinks this maybe is a blessing in disguise going into ACC play, even though you don't want to lose a game. If he can get his offense to click enough, doesn't have to put 40 points on the board, but click enough in that environment that I'm describing on the road. And even if they cover the spread and win by 7 or 7.5, and that's it, or even just get a win in general, I'm sure his speech after the end of the game is going to be, we got through, a difficult environment. Now we're ready for ACC play. The environments we're going to get there aren't going to be harder than this, even if those teams are better. So if you can do this, you can do that, and then he'll really be able to gauge his team maybe more than some of the teams he'll play in ACC play who maybe had easier tests in out-of-conference play. Because despite the Ohio game, another thing RDZ was trying to, he was almost trying to downplay the West Virginia's loss to Ohio. Like, he's just a down player. Although those 2 press conferences are a little different than a couple years ago. He just downplayed everything all day. And what I do think would be West Virginia's only hope. And Nate, you mentioned Pitt not trying to get, needing to try to get things going on the ground. And the way you describe Pitt's offense, it also makes me think that Rich Rod would probably secretly love to be coaching the Pitt Panthers in a way, because a mobile quarterback running the spread with speedsters around him is exactly what he had back in the day and doesn't really have right now. But if the Mountaineers are going to win this game, it's going to be a rock fight. It's going to be probably like 2 years ago. And I don't know if you watched the Ohio game at all, Nathan.
A little bit. Caught it leaving Acrisure Stadium for
because what I was going to say, I think the reason why Mountaineer fans maybe can have a little bit of optimism here, the one unit that West Virginia needs to be good when they win the brawl has been good and was good against Ohio. Their defense looks way better than a year ago. I highly doubt Zach Alley's blowing a 10-point lead with 4 minutes left with that aggressiveness on that defense. That defense was turning over Parker Navarro play after play. They forced 3 interceptions. Navarro hadn't looked that bad his whole career. Their defensive game plan was the best he'd seen in a while, and they put a way better effort than Rutgers put up against him. The reason why West Virginia lost, they had no offense. They couldn't move the ball and couldn't score, and obviously you have to figure Pitt will, and maybe that's why the Mountaineers maybe are predicted to lose this game, because Pitt, if they just get 20 points, it's probably enough to win this. But West Virginia's defense has been forcing turnovers every game. They can force turnovers. And I think if West Virginia starts forcing turnovers and Eli Holstein hears the crowd and then they force an interception, and a couple of times they were close to taking it to the house. That's what won them 2 years ago. Beanie Bishop. They were able to take it to the distance. If they can get defensive scores and force turnovers, even if their offense never gets going, that's how they can win the brawl. That's what happened. With Nico Marchio had 80 yards of offense and they won the game 2 years ago, as insane as that is. So that, I think, is the plan. I do want to ask you, though, how much of Pitt's success so far has been what you expected? Now, everyone expected them to win these games, but I know there have been some colleagues of mine that cover Pitt that have talked about they haven't really been impressed by Pitt, despite wins and a big win over Duquesne as an FCS, and then Central Michigan kind of was in the game for a while. For you, how has Pitt played, judging them off of their competition so far, going into now their biggest game of the year?
I think their offense has been pretty good. I mean, I wouldn't say super impressed, but they've done their job. There's been some rough patches early in the Duquesne game. I mean, there was just some rush to be shaken off. And again, going back to that Holstein injury, he didn't play super well in the spring. And then finally, Narduzzi and K-Bell talked about the final 2 weeks of camp. He really, took it up a notch. And so it took him a little bit in game action to get going against Duquesne. And then they scored the first drive against Central Michigan. So the offense has been pretty good, but Holstein has made 2 bad mistakes, throwing 2 interceptions. And that'll be, I think, critical and pivotal key to Pitt and Morgantown is you can't turn the ball over, because the big difference, though, between these 2 teams is that 2023 team and this 2025 offense, completely different.
Yeah,
like
that's true.
So they're going to be able to move the ball and at least score some points. Now, that offense in 2023 with Jurkovic, it was really one-dimensional. Phil really just could not throw the ball. Whereas this team, it's still kind of leaning one-dimensional, with Holstein more or less throwing the ball. I think they've thrown about 70 passes to about 53 rush attempts. And the big thing, though, offensively on the ground is Desmond Reed can rip off a big run. Now, if he's swallowed up and West Virginia can be disruptive in the backfield, it could be a long day on the ground. And then they're going to really have to force, force the ball through the air. And when Holstein does that, sometimes it's when he makes mistakes. So the offense, I mean, it's been good, but it could be better. Now, defensively, the front 7 has been as expected. Their linebackers are athletic. The only issue there is they don't have the depth that they wanted. They have a couple season-ending injuries there. So it's really up to their top 3. And those 3 guys of Kyle Lewis, the All-American, coming back, Rasheem Biles and Braylon Lovelace in the middle, those guys are going to play like 98% of the snaps here in Morgantown. And then the D-tackle room's pretty deep. They got a 4-man rotation there. And the edge rushers, they're still trying to figure out to get more pressures, to finish more off the edge. They've been getting some good pressure, but the sacks, there's still a lot left on the table. They've got 9 so far, which is like 4th in the nation right now, 4th or 5th. Still pretty high, but there's still a lot left on the table, a lot left to be desired. The front 7 looks solid. The secondary, I mean, if West Virginia can attack the secondary, and Narduzzi talked about a lot of eye candy, and getting the defensive backs to stay disciplined will be huge. West Virginia could take some shots at this Pitt defense. So the front 7 defensively, the passing game on the offense, been pretty solid at this point in the season, but they could be much better.
Yeah, Nathan Breisinger of Pittsburgh Sports Now, Luke Blain, Mike Asti here, West Virginia Sports Now's Mountaineer Report, as we are previewing the 108th, so a lot of games, 108th Backyard Brawl here, 2025, the return of Rich Rod. And again, you couldn't write this any better. The return of Rich Rod is the end of this current installment. It's several years before they play again. It is in Morgantown, and it is on September 13th. Now, speaking of edge rushers, I didn't see this in any of the transcripts that anyone sent me, and I did consider going down there to talk to Narduzzi, but I didn't make it down. Jamori Robinson is that elephant in the room. He now appears to be eligible, and I will say he's been practicing with West Virginia this past week. Now, there's some mixed messages on whether or not he's going to play in the brawl. Rich Rod is the one who actually kind of calmed that down. We were all saying it looked like he was going to play, and then Rich Rod, I don't know if he intentionally did that to try to throw Pitt off, or what? Because after he said he may not play, then Zach Alley got up there and said, well, I just met him for the first time an hour ago and he's practicing. So he's out there practicing, and it is a position that you could throw him in, even though I know we always hear complex and multiple. Narduzzi even used Zach Alley. That was funny to me. He used the same term to describe Zach Alley's defense as what Zach Alley uses and what Rich Rod uses. It almost leads me to believe that Narduzzi has either heard them say it or it's just completely a coach terminology that his defense is multiple. But was there anything mentioned at all of the possibility of Jamori Robinson? Because from what you're describing, that could be a very underrated game changer here. He is the edge rusher that could get in Eli Holstein's kitchen and make that a long day. And if he's not out there, then West Virginia is going to have to rely more on the next end of the defense, more on their linebackers, and more on causing turnovers. But that's the pass rusher that team was going to rely on this year. They have not yet been able to get on the field, but now that's certainly a possibility, if nothing else, even though it's not been officially confirmed.
Yeah, Narduzzi hasn't really talked much about him. He really hasn't pointed out any singular guy defensively. But, I mean, if there's a guy or two for West Virginia that can be disruptive, I think it can make it a long day and make it a little hectic for Pitt, on top of everything with the crowd and all of that.
Yeah, and he would be jumping up from UTSA. Maybe it's an unknown that he'd have a rough first game. You don't know. But there were some national people thought he could be a dark horse, a Big 12 newcomer of the year, or if West Virginia was good, he could, lead the conference in sacks. I don't know if I thought all that was going to happen, but that was the hype around him, and they've yet to see him on the field. It maybe could happen here in the Backyard Brawl. I also will imagine, and Narduzzi loves to do this. He's done this every year because even Brown would not announce the QB, and then he always throws in, and Nico Markill's the one. Let's not call a charade. I'd imagine Nico Markill does start this game, but I also imagine that you're going to see multiple quarterbacks in this game, and you're going to see Jalen Henderson in this game a little bit more. I did see Narduzzi talked about that despite him being 0 for 2, 0 for 4, that, you can't read into that. He could throw the ball. I haven't seen that yet, but we will see what maybe he can do. Guys, what I do want to go to a little bit now before maybe we go a little bit back into the game and then give our projections and predictions of what's going to happen is this is the annoying part of it for me. I'm kind of sick of talking about this, but we have to because the fans keep talking about it. Both coaches brought up a little bit about wanting to play the rivalry. Nate, you mentioned at the top of this show that it's a little different than Penn State because they lost that recent series. They may never play them again. It's probably unlikely. Penn State doesn't want to do it. No matter what they say, they don't want to do it. Look at their out-of-conference schedule. And with their peers scheduling 0 Power Fours, they're not motivated to play a rivalry game when Indiana's playing nobody. They're not going to do it. So that's probably put to bed. But both Pitt and West Virginia coaches, administration, no matter who's there, different coach at West Virginia, different AD now at Pitt, they want to play this, and they both have said that. But Narduzzi did throw a jab or two at West Virginia that I do think kind of was unfounded, but that's just what he does. What do you want to see happen with this rivalry, and what do you think maybe is going to happen? It's not going to be played here until 2029, but Narduzzi did talk about, he'd be okay with playing at the end of the year. He doesn't care when it's played. He wants to go back to Thanksgiving. Rich Rod didn't really go into any of that. I highly doubt that occurs. Knowing Ren Baker, if he's still the AD, I think it'll still be a week 3 situation in out-of-conference play. I don't think he'll dip into end of the year Thanksgiving when no one else in the Big 12 is doing that. But just from what you're hearing around the Pitt program, why do you think we didn't see the Backyard Brawl from your vantage point? Because I've given my opinion on it multiple times. I don't think it fit in the schedule. But why do you think we didn't see the Backyard Brawl get fit into 26, 27, or 28? And then do you think there's a real chance that the Brawl is played some other time than week 3 of out of conference when it does start back up again?
No, I don't see it, the game week changing at all. I think it's going to stay early in the season. I mean, very rarely at this point too, in this era of college athletics, do you see, big out of conference games played like that anymore. I mean, Clemson, South Carolina, maybe Florida, Miami, or Florida State, Florida, Miami. But I know those two, Florida and Miami, play in, I think, 2 weeks. But I don't think the game week will change. But just from our vantage point and just from what Narduzzi said, I mean, it sounds like they've made an effort, but really, as you said, Mike, I mean, you can't look too much into it. And of course, I mean, just everything scheduling wise has been just so hectic. And I know Pitt, obviously, they have a couple of out of conference games coming up. They got a Wisconsin home and across the pond series coming up when they're supposed to play in Ireland in 3 years in 2027. And Notre Dame is sprinkled in there a couple years before this series comes back for Pitt and West Virginia. So I just think in the end, really, I mean, both sides, I think, probably made an attempt, but in the end, it's scheduling. I mean, just the difficulties of scheduling. And right now, the benefit for Pitt and why they probably can work it in a little bit more is they still play 4 non-conference games.
Yeah.
And that very likely will change here in the next year or two, which will make it a little bit more difficult. But both schools still really want to play and have expressed that they want to play. So I think those games will still absolutely be on the schedule moving forward. 2029, obviously, when the games come around, like they're not going to obviously cancel that series when it comes back around.
That would be wild.
Yeah, it would be. But I just think it comes down to the schedule dynamics.
Yeah. I mean, in all honesty, that's what it is. Fans like to go back and forth on who's to blame. Oh, you don't want to play me, etc. In raw reality, it's neither school's fault on why they're not going to play next year. It may be an administration from 15 years ago if you really want to argue, but once you got to this point, there was no way to fit it in. You can make an argument now that Pitt's kind of, on the verge of what West Virginia's been doing the last several years that Ren Baker said was unreasonably hard. They're borderline stacking out of conference games that are, I mean, when you look at even some rumors and reporting and what you already mentioned with Wisconsin, I think UCF's in there. I mean, they could have a year with 11 Power Fours, which nobody's doing anymore. And the Mountaineers did for several years in a row, which was a negative for the program. And now they're trying to get away from that. That's part of why they canceled the Alabama series. And you also did mention Pitt only playing 8 conference games in the ACC. I'd imagine that's changing. Now the SEC goes to 9. The Big 12's been 9. The Big 10 is 9. They would kind of get left out in the cold. And even some comments from the committee that maybe they would look at, that number of games. So if that's the case, I'd imagine they're going to go to 9, but that would leave you with 1 Power 4 and out of conference, what you probably should do. And it probably should be the Brawl. But for even both of you, because of the difficulty with scheduling, do you guys want to see the Brawl every year? Or if these programs have, hypothetically, Pitt goes to 9 conference games as well in the ACC, and then it's 9 for both, and they only want to play 1 Power 4, would that be boring where you want to mix and match and get another one in there? If they play the Brawl every single year from 29 on and continue it after that 32 game, you never would get anybody else. That'd be it. I mean, the Penn State series would completely be killed. You would never get West Virginia, Virginia Tech again. There would be nothing. There'd be no Pitt has played, some of these historic programs. Do you want to see the Brawl every year, or do you want to be able to see both of these two programs kind of have some ability to tinker with the schedule? That's the issue. There is a negative of playing the Brawl every year, even though most fans want it.
I think when it comes to this game, and in West Virginia's case specifically, I think it's so important to have those regional rivalries because you really don't have that now. Ever since WVU joined the Big 12, I mean, the closest thing you have is Cincinnati, and it's like, yeah, okay.
And the conference won't even give it to them. They don't even protect them as a rival. Yeah,
exactly. So it's when it comes to those teams that are around you that you can just truly hate, and from the fan perspective, I remember being a student at the Virginia Tech game. That was a big deal. That was a huge deal because we had that close proximity rival that it was important to beat. And I have this is the game that fans get excited for the most on WVU's side, I think, specifically. I mean, because the Big 12, kind of a coin toss, and also all of those teams are so far away, and just the fact that WVU really hasn't been a contender in the Big 12 for such a long time. And I don't know. I think from the fan perspective, I think you do want to keep that. I think that is the main source of energy for WVU fans, specifically in the past few years when it comes to WVU. I remember people, like when I was a student, I remember people talked about the upcoming season and, oh, I can't wait for the Backyard Brawl. Can't wait to go to the Pitt game. Can't wait to this, that. You didn't really have that before that. I mean, my freshman year was the Brawl didn't get renewed till my sophomore year. So freshman year, nobody was really excited for that season. But also, I mean, it was also because of, in the thick of the Neil Brown years. So I don't know. This game just feels like such a shot of adrenaline for the fan bases. I feel like as an athletic department and in terms of, all the money that gets brought in, all the people to come into Morgantown, I have to think that this would be a net positive for the team.
Yeah, that's all true. But you did also talk about the Virginia Tech game, which, knowing Ren Baker, as long as he's AAD, I know a lot of West Virginia fans, their dream out of conference schedule is Pitt, Virginia Tech, and then some maybe care about Marshall and some don't.
Yeah.
But you're not going to play Virginia Tech ever if you play the Brawl every year. Ren Baker is, I do believe he's true to his word that he's doing the one Power 4 and out of conference play. Now, Nate, something that Luke brought up is also interesting from a Pitt perspective because they are not in a college town. They're in a pro market. It is harder to get fans excited, even if they would have a championship year. So whether fans like it or not, having West Virginia come to Acrisure guarantees a sellout, guarantees money that will go in Pitt's pocket. Pitt could laugh, whether it doesn't matter whether it's 75% West Virginia fans, they're taking the home revenue gate for that game. It is their home field. If you lose the Brawl, you lose that. But it could be a sense of if they go to 9 conference games, then do you want invested in the Brawl every single year? Because based on how Pitt has scheduled up until this point, it may change. They've liked to ease into years pretty easily with easy games, the Duquesnes, the Kent States, Youngstown State, and then get a group of 5 in there. Then if you're playing the Brawl every year, I mean, this also is separate if they somehow are in the same conference in the future, but to say they aren't. From a Pitt perspective, money also matters to them. I mean, it's not like they're rolling in cash either. And the gate would be very important for them to gain by playing the Brawl, but then you would lose everything else. Do you think a Pitt fan would be mad if the out-of-conference schedule becomes what the Mountaineers have been dealing with, if they go to 9, and then it's Brawl every year and they agree to that, and then you never see anyone else in terms of a power program in there outside of the ACC in West Virginia?
I think there would be more of a preference to have West Virginia on the schedule, especially, if you're not going to play Penn State. And I agree. I don't think that game will come back. And I don't think Pitt should play that game because Penn State doesn't want to play that game. And let's be real, though, too. Pitt is not going to win many of those games either. At least the West Virginia matchup, it's pretty even. It's a lot of toss-ups every single year. Penn State just better recruiting, better overall team. But I was going to go the same avenue.
West Virginia's experienced that recently as well. Starting years with Penn State.
And I was going to go the same avenue that you went with. This game sells at the stadium. I mean, they're not going to I don't think they should get rid of that or want to get rid of that because every time West Virginia comes to town, they know they can fill that stadium rather than Cincinnati or UCF or even these talks of Ole Miss potentially playing Ole Miss over the next 5 years. But this game will bring 65 to 70,000 people into the stands. And I think people want that type of real rivalry because just as you mentioned, Luke, in the Big 12 with West Virginia not really having a true rival, neither does Pitt in the ACC. They have Syracuse that they try to force. And then I think the other 2 protected games are like Boston College and Louisville. And there's no weight behind those games in terms of any sort of rivalry or deeper sentiment. I mean, Syracuse maybe, but that's more of a basketball.
I was going to say
the
basketball rivalries,
So I think you want to have a game where you really can go and look into, and then it's even it's pretty much even every single year. That it can be a toss up, no matter how good a program is or not. That's just how this rivalry is. Anybody can win any given year, and I think and credit to Pitt and Mike, you said about playing some of the inferior teams to start the conference, but to start the non-conference play. But Pitt has actually, I felt, brought in some good out-of-conference teams over the years and have stacked 3 Power 4 or maybe, a group of 5 when UCF was still group of 5. But, 2 years ago in 2023, they had Cincinnati, they had West Virginia and Notre Dame. So they've done that now. Notre Dame, who knows? There's obviously all sorts of math equations that have to go on for the ACC to go to 9 conference games, but they were talking about maybe Notre Dame plays 5 or 6 conference games, and that's technically your 9th conference game for a bunch of ACC teams. But I think it just in the end, this Pitt West Virginia rivalry, people got the taste of it now, and I don't think a lot of people want it to go away. And I think it's a game that should be continued.
Yeah. And when you also think about it from the Notre Dame perspective, not only do they just not want to be in a conference, and if they can make money on their own TV deal, and they clearly can get in the playoff and go to the national championship game without being in a conference, there's not really motivation for them as long as the rules allow them to get in without having to go through a conference. But you also may see Notre Dame start easing up their own schedule. They got in the playoff despite losing a group of 5 game. I wouldn't be shocked, and I've even heard this nationally, I wouldn't be shocked if they stop caring about playing USC and some of these other traditional rivals they have. They got to have some Power Fours on the schedule, but if they're going to play 6 ACC games or however many it'll be, maybe a couple more are sprinkled in, but I don't think there's a motivation for them to stack their schedule with 5 or 6 ranked teams a year and all of these unnecessary games either. They're going to probably try to play the 10 Power Fours in total like everybody else is doing and not try to go beyond that. So that also could be in Notre Dame's mind that, as you know, Nathan, Notre Dame's mind, and they're kind of always working different than what the ACC is trying to do. So they may be saying, well, that doesn't really benefit us because we're not really in your conference in football. And it does throw a monkey wrench in. But I have even heard Narduzzi, I believe he even spoke on that he imagines they're going to go to 9. So he's even speaking on that publicly now. So I'd imagine that is going to happen. Mountaineer report here, available everywhere you get your podcasts, YouTube, and throughout the West Virginia Sports Now network. Nathan Breisinger of Pittsburgh Sports Now, Luke Blain, Mike Asti here as we are previewing the Backyard Brawl. And they're going to at least play in 2029. We know that. They're not going to play before that. And they're going to play on Saturday. And whoever wins this game is really going to have bragging rights. 2-2. West Virginia fans can kind of chalk it up to the Neil Brown era, or 3-1. And then it doesn't matter. Pitt's going to be able to take the bragging rights for those next several years. What are some keys to this game, guys? We talked a lot about it already here at the top of the show, but kind of how you think this maybe is going to play out, or 2 different scenarios that this game could play out. What are some keys for you guys?
Luke, why don't you go ahead first?
Yeah, either one. Yeah.
All right. I think for WVU, I think the important part is controlling the tempo. I brought up earlier that they lost the time of possession battle. OU had 40 minutes last week. You're not going to win a football game that way. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable to have that ball that long.
Nathan, you don't know what we had to deal with, man. They didn't even have bathrooms for a whole half. Literally, the bathrooms broke in the press box in the second half. Mike Montoro, who you spoke to, and I had to go to the Concord to go to the bathroom. They literally told us in there that this is just what happens there, and they're already at budget, and they're not going to be able to fix anything. And that's what I always told the West Virginia fans, too, that they're worried about money. Do they have money? They couldn't do a better roster. They got more money than Ohio. They got more money than Ohio, who doesn't have bathrooms. Go ahead, Luke. That
is totally fair. You and I were both there together. I think it's fair that you're able to let that out. But I think going into this matchup, I think, looking back, WVU has to find some sort of chemistry on offense, and it just wasn't there the whole day. You have the real struggle, the challenges of Jaheim White and James Bray both being out for the season. You got to find something new now. And maybe Rich Rod was right. And maybe he just completely dropped the ball on preparing this team last week. Maybe with the right preparation and the right amount of practice and the right scheming, maybe WVU comes out and looks like a totally different team. I don't know. I can't say I buy that. But I think WVU definitely, the defense, they're going to have to lean on the defense, because that's the problem with the system that WVU runs on offense. It's very quick tempo. There's a lot of moving parts, a lot of passing. If there's incompletions, the clock stops, and that just gives Pitt more time. I wouldn't be surprised if WVU as a whole loses, as a net on the season, is losing the time of possession battle for the whole year once you add it all up and it's all said and done. But it's also from the standpoint of defense really, really has to step up in the first half, because WVU, you kind of forget about it because of the final with Robert Morris, that WVU had a pretty bad first half. 10-7 at halftime. You're not going to get by playing like that, not in the Big 12 and not against Pitt. And they certainly didn't get by with it last week. So it was just bad football all around last week. You really got to flush that one out of your system. You got to learn from it. I say let Nico throw it some more. I really liked the way he looked whenever they let him air it out. I think these short routes, these short reads, I'm not sure that that's a sustainable form of offense at the power 4 level. So that's just going to have to be, you're going to have to adjust. You're going to have to use the crowd to your advantage. I say kick off first, let the crowd keep that energy up. I think that was a big missed opportunity for Neil Brown with Penn State last year. I know Neil Brown liked to receive the ball. I think that took the energy out of the crowd.
He literally did like 27 games in a row or something ridiculous, and then tried to tell us that, it's just a random stat out there. It's a record in the history of the sport. Like, I don't think it's
yeah. But, I mean,
yeah.
If you have that opportunity, kick the ball off, make Pitt face the crowd at its peak, which will more than likely be near the beginning of the game. So I think just controlling the clock. I think the defense has been great, like you said. I think the defense will be what keeps this team in the game, and it will be what keeps it close. I really do see. I'm not sure either team will reach 30 points in this game. I wouldn't be surprised if they did.
Look, it's funny, that the big point there is about time of possession, and to West Virginia's benefit, they're probably going to be gift wrapped the time of possession, because the way Pitt plays offensively, they're not really controlling the ball a whole lot. You look at the numbers against Central Michigan. Central Michigan held the ball for 36 minutes in that game to 23 minutes for Pitt. I mean, there's a huge disparity over the first two games in terms of time possession, and Pitt obviously has blown out those opponents, but like that's where agreed that could be huge if West Virginia really can control things. But I think for Pitt, the big keys are you have to start fast. You have to be able to get points early to take the crowd out of it. And that's like any type of game like this. When you go into a hostile environment, you got to take the crowd out of it. And then, Holstein getting the ball to his playmakers going to be pivotal. I mean, he's got to have good protection up front and be able to do so. And that's just what's been successful so far this year and over the last year as well in K-Bell's offense. But defensively, they have to force some turnovers. They have only one forced turnover on the year. It's a fumble. They haven't had any interceptions. Their DBs really haven't been in position to make those type of plays. Either, they've not been in position, or the opposing offenses have just either run or just not thrown and given them an opportunity to do so. And that's obviously what's won some of these games in this rivalry.
Yeah, go to last year. Yeah.
You talk last year, late game interception, you talk the block punt. I mean, just turnovers and takeaways are going to be critical. You look back, obviously, in 2022, that game was won on a pick six. 2023, Jerkovic throws 2 picks. Pitt has to find a way to force a couple turnovers defensively. And their front seven can make it difficult for the quarterback, so there's going to be pressure. Now, Pitt has to capitalize on that. So getting the offense going early and then forcing turnovers defensively, I think, will be key for Pitt.
Yeah, and it is interesting because I would imagine that if West Virginia wins, they're going to win the time possession battle. But as kind of you were talking, Nate, and this is what Rich Rod was doing back in his first tenure, not winning the time possession battle doesn't automatically mean you're going to lose if you have a great offense. I mean, the Pat White offense was scoring so quick and there were so many big plays that they didn't win time of possessions in some of those years, but they're winning 10, 11 games every single year because they were stacking points. And that's kind of what Pitt's been doing so far this year. So we'll see if that even matters. Maybe Pitt wouldn't care if they win the time possession battle if they're scoring points. And I think the only chance for either one of these teams to have a blowout win would be Pitt. I don't think West Virginia is going to be blowing anybody out with this roster, but there's kind of two options here. Pitt wins this in a blowout, or West Virginia and Pitt play another rock fight. This is really, really close down the wire. And as you mentioned, it comes down to who makes more mistakes, if there's turnovers or if there's not. And Mika Markiel, made some towards the end of the Ohio game. I don't think he's as turnover prone as Garrett Green was. That was kind of Garrett Green's issue. He kind of got, too aggressive, got kind of some Brett Favre in him last year that wasn't there the year before and tried to do too much. But it'll be interesting if West Virginia can get big plays moving. If I was Rich Rod, and obviously he's probably a Hall of Fame coach, and I'm not, but I would try for a big play earlier. They've been getting big plays with Cam Vaughn, who I imagine they're going to try to get out open and try to get big plays to Cam Vaughn. But it's not been early. They don't try early. They kind of feel out the game and then eventually go to those big plays. That they could be down 2 scores at that point if Pitt's offense clicks. So try a big play sooner. And if you want, I'm also going to kind of leave with this. If you want a feel-good story that this entire matchup seems like we're writing a Disney movie, and maybe if it ends, because West Virginia's never wanted to agree to this before, but maybe if they would win a Big 12 someday, or they win this matchup, maybe they eventually would agree to that 2007 30 for 30, and then you could write it and end it this way. If you want to have a script that way, there's a recruit that snubbed Pitt that's from Western PA that's on the Mountaineers. They have really not used yet, and that includes this year. It's pretty much just been jet sweeps. Narduzzi's mentioned that he thinks Rich Rod is holding things out that he has in his holster that he knows he can use, that he has not seen on film from those first 2 weeks. If there's a time you get Rodney Gallagher the football and you try, it is this game. He's going to wear a patch to honor his late mother. His family is going to be there. His sister went to Pitt. I don't think there's love lost between the Gallaghers and Narduzzi, from what I know. He went to West Virginia, kind of eliminated Pitt off his graphic even before the end of that recruiting session, kept Penn State on there, but Pitt was off earlier than they would have wanted to be off, from what I've heard. If you want to write a storybook ending here and game-winning touchdown for Rodney Gallagher, or have him get in the end zone somehow, or a big play for Rodney Gallagher, to have Rodney Gallagher only have a carry or two and not even a target as a receiver and a couple jet sweeps, and then you go ahead and end the brawl that way, that would be really, really disappointing. I think almost from both sides of media. I want to see Rodney Gallagher and see what this man can do. And if there's ever a time, it is now. So if God is writing this script, I almost feel like that would be the way to do it if the Mountaineers are going to get a win somehow, is to involve Rodney Gallagher in some way. But I don't think there's any way the Mountaineers win this game in all seriousness unless they're causing turnovers. Unless Pitt can probably win it even if they lose the turnover battle because they have a more high-powered offense somehow. But if West Virginia does not win the turnover battle or force turnovers, maybe even get a defensive score, I just then don't see how they put it together. I mean, maybe Nico Markiel can do what he did at Arizona. If you want to watch that film, that's the best of Nico Markiel ever. But it's hard to believe it, and we'll see what Jalen Henderson can do when he's in there. But he's kind of got bottled up. He had a couple big runs. He had some penalties that called him back, and he's overthrowing balls. So the passes that Narduzzi's saying to look at the stats, they're way over the receiver's head. So they're going to have to get more on target here. I guess we'll go to the picks then. We'll do our guest after. So Luke, what is your pick for this game? I mean, Pitt is the favorite here, but the pressure's on the Mountaineers. The pressure's on Rich Rod. I mean, this is that feel-good story if West Virginia can get a win, but it also could be doomsday if he goes in that post-game presser and it's a Pitt blowout in probably his last ever game against the Pitt Panthers. That would be a rough way to go and start his second West Virginia tenure as well.
I mean, that's been the question that's been on my mind all day. I really just, how do I see this game playing out? And I can't confidently give my stamp of approval for WVU to win this game.
Yeah.
After watching what we did last week. That's just it just
Okay.
I really can't wrap my head around it. I think the fans are going to be big time. I think the defense is going to have to play an even bigger role than it did last week.
Yeah.
But assuming that we just kind of go out there and see the same old, I can't see it. And I have to take Pitt. I'll give it a final score of 24-21. We'll go there, but
still close then.
Okay. I can give them a close game. I don't think this game ends in a blowout. I will say that. I do not believe that either team runs away with this one. I just think Pitt has the firepower. I think Pitt has a more cohesive roster with a returning head coach and a lot of returning players.
Yeah.
And I brought that point up last week before Ohio, and Ohio ended up winning because I think of that. You have players who are used to a certain system and who are used to a certain style of play, and it worked in Ohio's favor that day. Even though they had a really bad second half offensively, they were able to out-scheme WVU for the most part for the whole day. And I think that this is, just given the track record, I can't confidently pick WVU in this game.
Yeah, Nate.
Yeah, before the season, I was looking at this game, and I just felt that Pitt, obviously, we talked about it earlier, on paper, looked better in this game. And now that, the game's here, I really don't shift that mindset. I think, putting this score out there, I've said it already earlier this week, but I think I have Pitt 30-10 in this game. I think I have not seen much from the West Virginia offense that really makes me think that they're going to put up enough points. I think Pitt's defense, especially the front and that defensive line, it's been pretty good against the run, and West Virginia just has not showed much at all, on the ground. And then, if they can limit anything big from Nico and whoever else is going to be at quarterback, I think defensively they're going to have a good showing, and then offensively they're going to probably break out 2 or 3 explosive plays, whether that's Desmond Reed or Holstein finding someone. I just think it's just one of those games that I think Pitt is favored pretty decently in this game, and I think it's a game they should, everything aside with the crowd and everything like that, Pitt just has the better team going into Morgantown. I mean, of the 3 previous matchups in this 4-game installment, you can never say that. You thought, even with the way things were going for West Virginia, you really never felt truly comfortable about Pitt in any of those games. But I think there's some comfortability here. But as we talked about the pressure with Narduzzi, this is, the biggest line it's been in this rivalry. And crazier things have happened. Pitt, not the greatest at beating teams they really should, and beating by a wide margin. There's a lot of games they've let down. I mean, you can count on more than 2 hands the amount of times that has happened in Narduzzi's tenure. But I have Pitt by 20 points in this game.
Yeah, this does feel different than the other 3 of this current installment, because even though I'm sure you've heard this too, West Virginia fans just the entire tenure were unhappy. It is the darkest tenure in a half century. That's just the case. They weren't ranked that whole time, and Pitt, of course, had won the ACC in the middle of that and was ranked frequently, even including last year. But roster to roster, if you look at recruiting ranks, transfer portal ranks, they were pretty even. And I think we might have talked, or even other colleagues going into last year's game, nobody really knew. There were a lot of people even on the Pitt beat that thought West Virginia was going to win that game. They were coming off a 9-win year. They were taking care of the football when they won in 2023, and then last year they stopped taking care of the football and they had a worse year. But going into the year, that really wasn't the thought process. And they had an explosive offense. They didn't have a defense, but they had an offense that could score. And they really, if in all reality, they should have won that game. They should have held that lead. If their secondary was anything, at all to be proud of, instead of being one of the worst in the whole country, then they probably would have held that lead. This group's defense, I think, would have held that lead if they're in that scenario. Unfortunately, this year's defense doesn't have an offense that can score 30 points. You almost got to feel bad for this year's group. Conventional wisdom to me says that Pitt should win this game and Pitt should mop the floor with the Mountaineers, especially with Jaheim White not there and Jaden Bray not there. And Jaden Bray was going to be heavily involved in this offense too. The Rodney Gallagher story is probably not going to happen. He's not going to utilize him like I would want. Cam Vaughn's not going to get it done on his own, and he also has turned it over as well as scoring touchdowns this year. So he's far from perfect. Nico's been inconsistent. Jalen Henderson hasn't showed me enough nearly at all. The tight ends, who Rich Rod said he was going to use more as pass catchers than what he did before, they can't catch the ball. So it's kind of hard to be a pass catcher. I mean, they're literally not able to bring it in, even on wide open plays. If that stuff occurs and Pitt's going to score in this game, then it's going to really be a long day, and that's how you get to the 30-10 score. However, maybe for the purpose of the fun of this show, maybe for the fun of my coverage going in, I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised at all if Pitt wins this by 20-plus points and you get the 30-10. Would not be shocked at all. I don't think West Virginia can do that if that's the scenario. But I am going to go out on this limb here, and I am going to predict that West Virginia and Rich Rod get this win. And I will add the caveat, they're going to have less wins at the end of the year and have a worse year probably, and I don't think they're contending in the Big 12. They may even lose to some teams that they should beat going into those games. Wouldn't even be shocked if they lose to Colorado. But something in me feels like they're going to get this. I don't know why. Conventional wisdom in the analysis of this hour doesn't say they should, but I am going to predict the Mountaineers to win this game 23-20. that neighborhood. It's definitely going to be a close game. Maybe it would have to be a game-winning field goal. Maybe going to come down to a field goal somewhere in there. I'm going to give the defense credit to force turnovers, to get one of them be a defensive score, and then the offense somehow do enough. But in those 20-plus points, you're going to see a defensive touchdown. You're going to have to. I think offensively, they're probably going to score maybe 14 or so points. But defensively, they're going to have to pick it up and score some points on their own with a defensive score, maybe set up the offense in short field to maybe then kick a field goal or be set up elsewhere. I'm going to, pick West Virginia to win this game, but if Pitt would win this in a blowout, I would not be shocked at all, based on what we've seen, and certainly with Jaheim White out. So, guys, that'll do it, I guess. We previewed the death of the 108th Backyard Brawl. I think we previewed as much as we possibly could. We're going to see each other on Saturday. They're going to kick it off, and then they're going to take a break in this rivalry, regardless of what happens to Rich Rod and Narduzzi. Nathan, since you are the guest here on the show, any comments, any final words, anything you want to say about this rivalry, about what these coaches have said, about the current, the past, Rich Rod, the fun of this, anything at all?
No, I just think, there's a ton of excitement around, and even from the Pitt perspective, I know you guys have talked a lot about the West Virginia fans. I mean, they love this game. It means everything to them, and it means a lot. It's really picked up steam, I think, in the Pitt fan base. And of course, there's just a lot of fun hatred that goes around, and Narduzzi knows it. Eli Holstein knows it. I mean, you heard probably some of his comments that he said about the batteries and the beer thrown that may or may not happen, or whatever is going to happen. Kids flipping off people, but that happens at any stadium. So, but it's just going to be an electric atmosphere. I'm looking forward to it. I've never been to a game down there. Wasn't there in 2023. So, as a media personality, I'm just looking forward to feeling maybe the stadium shake.
What a first game for you. What a first game.
The
most anticipated game in a decade probably down there.
I know it'll be fantastic. And I think the one other wrinkle I'll add, Mike, to your prediction about coming down to a field goal and looking at the flip end of things, Pitt has a freshman kicker. So that might play into a little bit. I have him accounting for 3 field goals in my prediction. So if it comes down to a field goal for Pitt, I mean, think about it. That's a freshman kicker going into a tough environment.
Maybe they miss a kick or two. I mean, it could very well be that if Pitt loses this game, it doesn't mean they're. I wouldn't be shocked if West Virginia wins this game. They win time of possession, and even maybe Pitt wins total yards. Maybe Pitt wins total yards, but they get down there close. West Virginia, as Luke knows, and this, I think, I heard Narduzzi bring this up one of the days too, and this is another chance the Mountaineers have. Not only is their defense better than last year, their red zone defense is really good. They bring an energy to that red zone that's, I don't know why it's not there any other time in the game, but it is really there in the red zone. Maybe there's a drive where they turn it up, the fans are there, they stop them in a red zone situation. Narduzzi's in a 4th and 2, he chooses to kick a field goal. Maybe he'd probably go for it then, but who knows? Maybe he kicks a field goal because they're in a tough environment, and maybe you get a miss. I mean, that's a short kick, but maybe something gets in your mental that could be. And if you have that scenario, momentum would then go out of control. And then that's where, as long as West Virginia can do enough, maybe that could be the opportunity. But boy, this is one hell of a first game for you to be down there. I don't know if any other game you ever will be down there will ever top it. But I do think that obviously there's always been a hatred from the West Virginia perspective, even before 2007. There always was, because of close proximity, and just they're 2 historic programs that have been around a long time, and there's just always been a hatred. It never felt like the Pitt fan hated as much, but that certainly has come back, it feels like now. And maybe it's because, as you talked about earlier, maybe Pitt fans have sat down with themselves and said, well, Penn State doesn't want to be a rival, so if they don't want to be a rival, we can't make them one. We can't make them play. We don't really care about Boston College and Syracuse and Louisville and those schools. We like to win the ACC, but outside of that, Clemson, you can't be a rival with a recent dynasty who's has much more money than you. Like, that would be rough. So it's an equal program right near us. We recruit with them. They're not in our conference, but they're not in the Big Ten of the SEC. They're dealing with the same crap of us in a second-tier conference. They recruit with each other. And Nathan, as you know too, much to Pat Narduzzi's chagrin, because it almost feels like he didn't understand the market before he became the head coach of Pitt. A lot of West Virginia fans in the city of Pittsburgh. You're dealing with seeing West Virginia hats while you're walking around, maybe not on campus at Pitt, but around the city, around the outskirts, certainly in the suburban areas. I mean, I live in a suburb of Pittsburgh, and I got a West Virginia flag over here, a Pitt flag over here in my neighborhood. I mean, that's the case. Everybody in West Virginia is either a Mountaineer fan or maybe a small percentage Marshall. There's no one who's a Pitt fan. There are West Virginia fans in Pittsburgh, and I know RGZ doesn't like that, but that adds an extra dimension. It almost feels like there's an animosity because of that. I feel like that's part of Narduzzi's annoyance that even exists. So that adds to this as well. I'm sure he would love to shut up the fans, get the win, end the rivalry in his favor, and maybe him and Rich Rod are friends, but I think he would still like to beat his friend because you know how it is also. If you're great friends with somebody and you're not really rivals, beating them can also be just as sweet in a way. So maybe that's what Narduzzi's thinking. That'll do it here for this preview edition of Mountaineer Report. You can find this show everywhere you get your podcasts, of course, on YouTube. You can find Nathan's coverage at Pittsburgh Sports Now. And they're going to have a lot of it, I'm sure, with the Backyard Brawl and then the rest of their season, if you care. And, of course, ours at West Virginia Sports Now. So for Nathan Breisinger, Luke Blain, I am Mike Asti, and let's brawl. I guess that's how I'll end it.